On a hot Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind where the air feels thick enough to chew, a girl named Nia walked down a street most people only saw from the window of a passing car. Her sneakers were worn thin at the soles and the strap of her backpack dug into her shoulder, but she didn't complain. Complaining didn't fill the fridge or pay the electric bill. At 14, she'd already learned that some things just had to be carried. She wasn't heading home yet. Instead, she turned down Oak Ridge Lane, past boarded-up storefronts and houses with peeling paint, toward the edge of town where the neighborhood started to change. The houses got bigger, the lawns greener, the fences taller, and behind one of those tall iron gates lived a man people barely talked about, except in whispers. They said he used to be somebody important in the tech world, that he'd made millions before a car accident left him unable to walk, that he hadn't left his house in years, that he didn't speak to anyone. Nia didn't care about rumors. She cared about protein. Her little brother hadn't been eating well. Not because he was picky, he just got tired too fast. His skin had taken on a grayish tint, and sometimes he'd fall asleep sitting up at the kitchen table. The doctors called it something long and complicated, but the bottom line was this. His kidneys weren't working right, and without the right treatment, things would get worse. Fast. Their mom worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices by day and folding laundry at a hotel at night. And still, there were weeks when dinner was rice and ketchup. Meat was a luxury, eggs were a treat, and medicine? That came last. So Nia did what she always did. She figured out a way. Every afternoon after school, she walked to the back of the local bakery, where the owner, a kind woman with flour in her hair and a soft spot for kids who showed up hungry, would hand her a brown paper bag of day-old muffins, slightly squashed loaves or croissants that hadn't sold. Sometimes she traded them with the fruit vendor down the block for bruised apples or overripe bananas. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something kept her brother smiling even on the hard days. But today she needed more than bread and fruit. She needed eggs or beans, or even canned tuna. Anything with real nourishment. And that's when she remembered the man behind the gate. She'd heard the bakery owner mention him once. Said he used to order dozens of pastries every week before the accident. Now nothing. But maybe, just maybe, he still had a kitchen staff. Maybe they threw things out. Maybe they'd trade. It was a wild thought. Ridiculous even. But desperation has a way of making ridiculous things feel reasonable. So she filled her basket with the best of what she had, 6 slightly stale blueberry muffins, 2 cinnamon rolls with cracked glaze, and a small jar of peach preserves she'd made herself from fruit her grandmother had sent from upstate. She tied a clean cloth over it all and walked the extra mile to the iron gate with the intercom box. Her hand shook a little as she pressed the button. A crackle, then silence. She pressed it again. "Who is it?" The voice was rough, like gravel under tires. Hi?" she said, trying to sound older than she was. "My name's Nia. I live down on Maple. I brought some baked goods. Thought maybe your kitchen could use them? Or, I don't know, maybe you'd trade for something else?" Silence again. Longer this time, then a dry laugh. Not mean exactly, just tired. "Trade for what?" She swallowed. "For a miracle." The laugh came again, sharper this time. "Kid, if I had miracles, I'd be walking." "I know," she said quickly, "but my brother needs one, and I don't have money. So I thought, maybe you'd trade leftovers for hope?" Another pause. Then quietly, "Hope doesn't keep the lights on." "No," she said. "But it keeps you trying." For a moment she thought he might say something else. Ask her name again. Tell her to leave. But instead the intercom went dead. A second later the gate clicked shut with a soft buzz. She stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, wondering if she'd just made a fool of herself. Maybe she had. But as she turned to walk away, she noticed something. The muffins were still in her basket. She hadn't even gotten the chance to offer them properly. Still, she didn't cry. Crying didn't fix anything. Instead, she adjusted her backpack, tucked the jar of preserves tighter under her arm, and started the long walk home. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks. She passed kids playing basketball in a driveway, a woman watering her roses, a stray dog napping in the shade of a mailbox. Normal life, the kind of life that didn't include hospital bills or empty cupboards or brothers who fell asleep mid-sentence. When she got home, Her brother was sitting on the porch steps, drawing in a notebook with a stubby pencil. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Did you get anything good?" he asked. She sat beside him and opened the basket. "Muffins," she said. "And preserves." He made a face. "Again?" She laughed. "Yeah, again, but tomorrow, maybe something different." She didn't tell him about the gate, or the voice, or the word miracle, not yet, because hope was fragile, and she didn't want to break it by saying it out loud too soon. That night, after her mom came home and they ate their rice and beans by the dim light of a single bulb, Nia lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She replayed the conversation in her head. The laugh, the silence, the click of the gate. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. She didn't know. But she knew this. She'd try again if she had to. Knock on every gate, walk every mile, trade every last muffin if it meant her brother got a chance. Because sometimes, miracles don't come from the sky. Sometimes they start with a knock on a gate and the courage to ask. 2 days passed without a word. Nia went back to her routine. School in the morning, bakery in the afternoon, homework by flashlight when the power bill ran late. She didn't mention the gate again, not even to her brother. Part of her figured the whole thing had been a mistake, a moment of foolish hope that had evaporated the second the intercom clicked off. But another part, the part that still tucked an extra muffin in her brother's lunchbox even when she went hungry, kept listening for the mail truck. Then, on Thursday morning, there it was. Tucked between a bill and a flyer for a car wash fundraiser was a plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just her name written in careful, slanted handwriting, like someone who used to write letters before email took over the world. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. No logo, no fancy letterhead. Just 3 lines: "Bring your miracle to the side entrance at 4 p.m. Thursday. Don't be late. E." She read it 3 times. Then folded it carefully and slipped it into the pocket of her jeans as if it might vanish if she looked away. The rest of the day dragged. Math class felt endless. Lunch was a dry sandwich she barely tasted. Even the walk to the bakery seemed longer, her mind racing ahead to that iron gate. That side entrance she'd never noticed before. This time, she didn't bring just muffins. She spent the night before sorting through everything she had. The preserves stayed. They were her best offering, made with care, not bought. But she also packed a small notebook, its pages filled with dates, symptoms, doctor's notes, and scribbled questions. She'd been writing it down ever since her brother's first hospital visit. Not because she thought anyone would read it, but because if she didn't write it, she'd forget something important. And forgetting wasn't an option. At 3:45 p.m., she stood at the edge of the estate, heart thumping like a drum. The side gate was smaller, made of weathered wood, half hidden behind a hedge. No camera, no intercom, just a brass knob. She knocked. The door opened slowly. He was sitting in a wheelchair, wrapped in a dark wool blanket despite the warm air. His face was lined, his hair more gray than black, but his eyes, sharp, tired, and strangely alert, locked onto hers right away. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to see. "You came," he said. "You asked," she replied, holding out the basket. He glanced at it, then at the notebook peeking out of her bag. "That your miracle?" "Part of it," she said. "The rest is him." She tapped the notebook. "My brother." He wheeled himself back slightly, gesturing for her to step inside. The room beyond was quiet. Bookshelves lining the walls, a large window letting in golden afternoon light, a laptop closed on a low table. It smelled like old paper and coffee, not like a mansion, but like a place where someone thought deeply and alone. "Sit," he said, nodding to a worn armchair. She did, perching on the edge, basket in her lap. He didn't ask for the preserves right away. Instead, he pointed to the notebook. "Read me what's in there," she blinked. "You want me to read it?" Yes, so she did. At first, her voice wavered. She stumbled over medical terms: glomerular filtration rate, proteinuria, chronic kidney disease stage 2. But as she went on, something shifted. She wasn't just reciting facts anymore. She was telling a story about how her brother used to race her to the bus stop and now got winded climbing stairs, about how he hid his pain because he didn't want Mom to worry, about how the doctors kept saying we'll monitor it while the numbers got worse. She read until her throat felt dry. When she stopped, the room was silent except for the hum of a ceiling fan. The man, Elias, though she didn't know his name yet, leaned back. His fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. "You didn't come here for money." "No," she said. "I came because I didn't know where else to go." He nodded slowly. "Most people would have asked for cash. Or a check. You asked for a trade." "I don't want charity," she said quietly. "I want a chance." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition maybe, or regret. He reached for the basket, opened it, and took out the jar of preserves. He unscrewed the lid and inhaled. "My grandmother used to make peach preserves," he said, almost to himself. She'd can them in August. Said summer shouldn't go to waste. Nia didn't say anything. She just waited. After a long moment, he looked up. "There was a company I funded years ago. Small, obscure. They were working on a treatment for kids with kidney issues, something about slowing damage using a new kind of enzyme therapy. I pulled out after my accident. Too distracted, too broken." He paused, staring out the window. "But if your brother's condition matches what they called Protocol R7, there might be a trial." In Memphis, her breath caught. "A trial?" "Yes, but it's not simple. You'd need a specialist to confirm eligibility. Paperwork, travel, insurance. Won't cover it unless you jump through hoops most. People don't even know exist. I'll jump," she said. Instantly, he gave a small, tired smile. "It's not about jumping. It's about knowing which hoops matter." Then he wheeled over to the laptop, opened it, and typed something. A few seconds later, a printer in the corner whirred to life. He handed her a single page, a list of names, phone numbers, and a website she'd never seen before. "This is where you start," he said. "Call Dr. Lin first. Mention my name, Elias Thorne. Tell her you're looking into R7, she'll listen." Nia took the paper like it was gold. "But," he added, holding her gaze, "don't just read what they give you. Cross-check everything, ask why. If something doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't. The system's full of noise. You need signal." She nodded, tucking the paper into her notebook. He handed her back the basket, now empty of the preserves, but with a small USB drive taped to the inside. "Everything I have on that startup. Old emails, trial summaries, even my notes from investor meetings. It's outdated, but it's a map." She stared at it. "Why are you helping me?" He looked away. "Because you didn't ask for a handout. You asked for a trade, and you brought something real." She stood, clutching the notebook and the drive. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," he said. "Go do the work." She walked home in a daze. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples, but all she could see was the list in her hand. For the first time in months, the path ahead wasn't just a wall. It had a door. And someone had handed her a key. That night, after her brother fell asleep, she plugged the USB drive into the library computer the next day and stayed until closing. She read every file, took notes, underlined names, wrote questions in the margins, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone because somewhere behind an iron gate, a man in a wheelchair had remembered what it felt like to believe in something, and had chosen just this once to pass that belief on. The USB drive felt heavier than it looked, not because of its size, it was tiny, no bigger than a thumbnail, but because of what it held, possibility. Nia carried it in her pocket like a secret, touching it every few minutes just to make sure it was still there. She didn't tell her mom right away, not because she didn't trust her, but because hope was fragile and she didn't want to break it by saying it out loud too soon. Again. The next morning before school, she walked to the public library. It opened at 8, and she was the first one through the doors. She plugged the drive into an old desktop in the far corner, where the sunlight barely reached and the chairs squeaked when you moved. The files loaded slowly, emails from years ago, scanned research summaries, meeting notes scribbled in tight handwriting. Some of it was full of words she didn't understand. Biomarkers, renal fibrosis, phase 2 endpoints. But she didn't skip them. She copied every term into a fresh page of her notebook and looked them up one by one. By lunchtime, she'd matched her brother's symptoms to a paragraph labeled, "Patient Profile, Protocol R7. Her hands shook as she read it aloud under her breath. Persistent proteinuria, reduced GFR in pediatric patients under 16. No response to standard ACE inhibitors. That was him, word for word. She called the number Elias had given her during her lunch break. hiding behind the gym to get cell service. A woman answered on the third ring, calm voice, no-nonsense tone. Dr. Lynn's office. Nia cleared her throat. Hi, my name is Nia. I was told to call about Protocol R7 and Elias Thorne. There was a pause. Then softer. Elias sent you? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Longer this time. All right. Tell me about your brother. Nia did. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. Just gave the facts, the dates, the labs, the way he got tired walking to the mailbox. When she finished, Dr. Lynn said, bring his full medical file, everything, and come to the clinic on Friday. I'll see you at 2 p.m. Friday. 3 days away. Nia's stomach flipped. She had no way to get to the clinic, it was across town, and no money for a bus pass, let alone copies of medical records. But she didn't panic. She made a list instead. First, get the records. She went straight to the hospital after school, stood in line at the records desk and explained she needed everything for a specialist consult. The clerk frowned. There's a fee. How much? $42. She had 12 in her sock. But she didn't walk away. Instead, she asked if they'd accept payment later. The clerk shook her head. Policy. So Nia did the only thing she could. She called Elias. She used the library phone, dialing the number he'd scribbled on the back of the printout. He answered on the second ring. It's me, she said. I need help. She explained quickly, the records, the fee, the deadline. He didn't hesitate. Go back to the desk. Tell them Elias Thorne will cover it. Use my account number. He gave it to her slowly, making her repeat it twice. When she returned to the counter and said the name, the clerk's eyes widened. Mr. Thorne? You know him? We're working together, Nia said simply. An hour later, she walked out with a thick manila envelope sealed with a red stamp. Next, transportation. She couldn't ask her mom, she was working a double that day. So she walked to the bus depot, studied the routes, and figured out she'd need 2 transfers and 2 hours each way. She wrote the schedule in her notebook and set her alarm for 5 a.m. But Thursday night, as she was packing her bag, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Nia? It was Elias. I heard from Dr. Lynn, she's expecting you. I know, Nia said. I've got the bus schedule. A pause. Then, you're not taking the bus. I have to. It's all I've got. No, he said. I'm sending a car. She opened her mouth to argue, but he cut her off. It's not charity. It's logistics. You're representing my referral. You show up on time, dressed like you mean business. That's part of the trade. She didn't know what to say, so she just said, okay. Friday morning, a black sedan pulled up in front of her building. The driver, a quiet man in a pressed shirt, helped her into the back seat and handed her a bottle of water. Mr. Thorne said you'd need this. The clinic was clean and quiet. Nothing like the crowded ER she was used to. Dr. Lynn was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She read the file slowly, asked sharp questions, then ordered 2 new blood tests on the spot. You're sharp, she told Nia afterward. Most kids your age wouldn't know half of what you do. I had to, Nia said. Dr. Lynn nodded. If the labs confirm what I think, your brother qualifies for the Memphis trial. But it's not free. Even with insurance, there are co-pays, travel, lodging. It adds up. Nia's heart sank. How much? Roughly $8,000 out of pocket. The number hung in the air like smoke. She couldn't even imagine that much money. But before she could spiral, Dr. Lynn added, there's a nonprofit that partners with the trial. They help with costs for families in need. But you need a letter of support from a medical sponsor. Like who? Someone with credibility. A doctor, a researcher, or an original investor in the protocol. Nia knew exactly who that was. That evening, she called Elias again. She told him everything. The appointment, the labs, the cost, the letter. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'll write the letter. But I won't just sign it. I'll go with you. She blinked. What? I haven't left this house in 6 years, he said, voice low. But if this is real, if it's actually happening, I need to see it through. For him and for you. She didn't know what to say, so she just whispered, thank you. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. She'd visit him twice a week after school. Not as a beggar, but as a partner. She brought preserves, yes, but also updates, lab results, emails from the nonprofit, questions about trial logistics. He'd review them, correct her assumptions, and sometimes just listen as she talked about her brother's good days and bad. One afternoon, she found him staring at an old photo on his desk. A younger version of himself standing beside a lab coat-wearing team, all smiling in front of a whiteboard covered in equations. "You really believed in it, didn't you?" she asked. "I believed in fixing things," he said. "Then I broke and I stopped believing I could." "But you're helping now," she said. He looked at her. "You reminded me that broken things can still be useful." The day the nonprofit approved the funding, she ran all the way to his gate. She didn't knock. She just stood there, breathless, holding the acceptance letter. He opened the side door before she could say a word. "They said yes," she gasped. He didn't smile, but his eyes did, and in that moment something shifted between them. Not gratitude, not pity, but something deeper. Trust. She had shown up with nothing but honesty and effort. He had responded with access and attention. No grand gestures. No miracles. Just two people choosing to show up for something bigger than themselves. The trial wasn't a guarantee. But for the first time it was a real chance. And that was worth every step she'd taken, every word she'd written, every knock on a gate she thought would never open. The day they got the official go-ahead for the trial, Nia didn't scream or cry or jump up and down. She just sat on the edge of her bed, rereading the email for the 5th time, her fingers tracing the words like they might disappear if she blinked. "Your application has been approved. Travel arrangements will be coordinated. Treatment begins next month." It felt unreal, like something that happened to people in movies, not to kids who walked 3 miles for day-old bread. But it was real. And now there was work to do. She made lists, packing lists, medication lists, questions for the doctors. She even wrote down what her brother liked to eat when he felt sick: plain crackers, ginger tea, applesauce, and tucked it into her notebook like a battle plan. Her mom finally knew everything now. At first she'd been stunned silent, then tearful, then fiercely practical. "We'll make it work," she said, and that was that. No drama, just love, wrapped in resolve. Elias didn't vanish after the letter. If anything, he became more involved. He arranged for a medical social worker to help with travel logistics. He reviewed the trial consent forms with Nia line by line, explaining terms like placebo-controlled and adverse event reporting in plain language. "Don't sign anything you don't understand," he told her, "even if they're in a hurry. Especially if they're in a hurry." The night before they left for Memphis, Nia visited him one last time. She brought a fresh jar of preserves, peach and ginger this time, and a small envelope. "What's this?" he asked, nodding at it. "A thank you note," she said, "but not the kind you write in school, the real kind." He opened it. Inside was a single sentence, written in her careful script. "You didn't give me a miracle. You gave me a map. And that was better." He looked up, eyes glistening, and for the first time he smiled. A real one, not tired or polite, but warm. "You did the walking," he said. "I just pointed." The trial center was nothing like she expected. No cold, sterile hallways. Instead, it was bright, with murals on the walls and a play area for kids. The nurses knew her brother's name before they even checked in. They gave him a stuffed bear wearing a tiny lab coat. He held it the whole time. The treatment wasn't magic, it was slow. Injections twice a week, blood draws every morning, long waits in quiet rooms. But within 3 weeks his energy came back. He stayed awake through dinner. He laughed at a cartoon. He asked for seconds. Nia documented everything, not just symptoms but small victories. Walked to the vending machine by himself. Ate a whole banana. Didn't nap after lunch. She sent weekly updates to Elias, not because he asked, but because she knew he was watching. And he always replied, sometimes with a question, sometimes with a resource, sometimes just, "Keep going." Back home, word started to spread, not because Nia told anyone, but because her school counselor noticed she was missing classes for medical trips and asked what was going on. Nia explained briefly. The counselor, moved by her quiet determination, mentioned it to a local reporter who wrote human interest pieces for the city paper. The article came out on a Sunday. No flashy headline, just a short feature titled 14, and fighting how one girl knocked on a millionaire's door and changed 2 lives. It didn't exaggerate. It didn't invent drama. It just told the truth. A girl with a notebook, a man in a wheelchair, and a stubborn belief that help could look like partnership, not pity. The response was quiet but steady. A teacher from another school reached out, asking if Nia would speak to her students about advocacy. A retired nurse offered to drive her to future appointments. A local grocery store started donating healthy snacks for her brother's recovery. And Elias? He read the article twice. Then he called the reporter, not to complain, but to ask if she'd be willing to write more stories like it. There are kids like her everywhere, he said. They just need someone to listen. Something shifted in him after that. He began hosting weekly Zoom calls, not charity pitches but skill sessions. He taught kids how to write professional emails, how to read medical bills, how to ask the right questions in a doctor's office. He didn't call it mentoring, he called it passing the toolkit. Nia joined the first session from her brother's hospital room, laptop balanced on a tray. She watched as a shy boy from the next town over asked how to explain his sister's diagnosis to a college admissions officer. Elias didn't give a canned answer. He asked questions back. What does she want people to understand? What part of her story matters most to her? It wasn't about fixing, it was about framing, about dignity. One evening, after a long day of infusions, Nia's brother asked, "Is that the man who helped us?" She nodded. "Yeah, he seems nice." "He is," she said. "He just forgot for a while." "Forgot what?" "That people still need him." Her brother thought about that. Then he said, "Maybe we reminded him." She smiled. "Maybe we did." As the weeks passed, her brother's labs improved. His doctor used words like remarkable response and on track for remission. The trial team asked if they could include his case in a follow-up study. Nia said yes, but only if they kept his name out of it. "This isn't about fame," she told them. "It's about proof that it works." Meanwhile, Elias started leaving the house. Not far at first, just to the end of his driveway, then to the mailbox, then to the library to donate books on medical literacy. People stared, some whispered, but he didn't care. He carried a small notebook now, just like Nia's, filled with names of kids he was helping, questions they'd asked, resources he'd found. He never claimed credit, never posted about it online. But slowly, the neighborhood stopped seeing him as the reclusive millionaire and started seeing him as someone who showed up. One afternoon, Nia found him sitting on a bench outside the community center, talking to a group of high schoolers about internships. He saw her and waved her over. "You're back," he said. "Just for a few days," she said. "He's doing great." He nodded. "I knew he would." "No," she corrected gently. "We hoped." He smiled. "Hope with a plan is strategy." She sat beside him as the kids asked questions about resumes and college apps. She didn't say much, just listened. And for the first time, she saw herself not just as someone who needed help, but as someone who could give it. Because the real ripple wasn't the trial or the article or even the money. It was the quiet understanding that had grown between two people who refused to accept the world as it was, and chose instead to build something better, one honest conversation at a time. And that kind of change, it didn't need headlines. It just needed people willing to knock and others brave enough to open the door. A year had passed since the first knock on the gate. The seasons had turned, the leaves had fallen and returned, and life, quietly, steadily, had moved forward. There was no parade, no spotlight, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a boy who could run again, a girl who carried a scholarship letter in her back pocket, and a man in a wheelchair who now sat in the front row of a school auditorium, hands folded in his lap, watching the world he'd almost forgotten. It was awards night at the regional STEM fair. The gymnasium buzzed with parents, teachers, and students in slightly too big blazers and dresses that rustled when they walked. Posters lined the walls, projects on solar energy, water filtration, coding apps for dyslexic readers. And in the center, under a banner that read, "Young Innovators," stood Nia, beside a display titled, "Mapping Medical Access, a Student's Guide to Navigating Pediatric Trials." It wasn't flashy. No blinking lights or robot arms. Just clear charts, real stories, names changed, and a step-by-step guide she'd built from her own journey. She hadn't planned to present it. But when her science teacher asked if she had a project, she realized she already did. Her life had become the experiment, and the results were worth sharing. From the third row, Elias watched her. He'd arrived early, driven by the same quiet man who'd picked her up for the clinic months ago. He wore a dark sweater, his blanket neatly draped over his legs, and for the first time in years he didn't feel like a ghost in the room. People nodded as he passed. A teacher even said, "Glad you could make it." He just smiled and kept going. When Nia's name was called, she walked to the podium without hesitation. She didn't fumble with her notes. She didn't look down. She spoke clearly, calmly about how hard it was to find help when you didn't know the right words, how confusing medical systems could be, and how one connection, one person who listened, could change everything. "I didn't need a hero," she said, glancing toward him for just a second. "I needed a partner, and sometimes that's enough." Afterward, during the reception, she found him near the refreshment table, holding a paper plate with 2 slices of store-bought cake and a small jar, yes, peach preserves, sitting beside it. "You brought it," she said, smiling. "Couldn't let you have all the good stuff," he replied. They sat on folding chairs near the back, away from the crowd. No speeches, no cameras. Just 2 people who'd walked a hard road together, sharing toast with jam like old friends. Her brother ran over, cheeks flushed, holding a participation ribbon. "I helped her with the graphs," he announced proudly. Elias looked at him, really looked, and saw the color in his skin, the light in his eyes, the way he bounced on his toes like he had endless energy. "You did good work," he said. The boy grinned. "She says I can be a doctor someday." "You can be anything," Elias said, "especially if you keep asking questions." Later, as the crowd thinned, Nia's mom approached. She didn't say much, just placed a hand on Elias's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for seeing her." He nodded, eyes wet, and that was all that needed to be said. On the drive home, Nia sat in the back seat, scholarship letter in one hand, her notebook in the other. She wasn't thinking about fame or fortune. She was thinking about the next kid who might stand at a gate, heart-pounding, hoping someone would answer. She'd already started a small group at school, the Access Project, where students helped each other navigate everything from food assistance to tutoring to medical forms. No adults running it, just kids helping kids. And Elias? He'd begun working with a local nonprofit to create a digital toolkit for families facing rare illnesses. Simple guides, contact lists, template emails. He called it the first step, nothing grand, just practical, human. People sometimes asked him if he regretted all the years he'd shut himself away. He never gave a straight answer. But if you watched him now, on Zoom calls with teenagers reviewing college essays or just sitting in his garden with a jar of preserves and a quiet smile, you'd know the truth. He hadn't been healed. His legs still didn't work. But something inside him had been restored, not by a miracle, but by purpose, and that was enough. One evening, weeks after the awards night, Nia stopped by his house again. Not for help, not for advice, just to visit. She brought 2 jars this time, one peach, one blackberry. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. Crickets started their evening song. A neighbor walked a dog down the street. Normal life, the kind that doesn't make headlines but holds everything together. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't knocked?" she asked. He sipped his tea. "I think about it all the time. And then I remember you did knock. That's what matters," she nodded. "I used to think miracles were big things. Lightning strikes, sudden cures, money falling from the sky. And now I think miracles are just people choosing to care when it's easier not to." He smiled. "That's not a miracle. That's courage." "Same difference," she said, popping the lid on a jar and spreading a spoonful on a cracker. She handed it to him. He took it. They ate in comfortable silence. No one was cured overnight. No one became rich. No one's life was perfect. But they were better, stronger, seen. And in a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet struggles, that kind of connection, the kind built on respect, effort, and a jar of homemade preserves, was the rarest thing of all. Not a fairy tale. Not a viral stunt. Just 2 people who refused to give up on each other. And in doing so, gave others permission to hope. Because sometimes the most powerful miracles aren't the ones that change your body. They're the ones that change your belief in what's possible. And that That starts with a knock, a basket, a notebook, and the courage to say, I'll trade you this for a chance, no magic required. Just humanity.